So good afternoon. After the lunch, this is the first session and a very important session. There is nothing more important than ESG, especially if you are following the newspapers and the current issues, whatever is happening in the country, abroad. So everybody was in Middle East last week who cared about environment. So when we talk about ESG and the businesses, everybody should know why this panel is here. And I'll come to what happened in last 10 to 15 days. First, you see my panel, Bharati, Balaji, one of the most well-known general counsel we have in the country. Meghna, Mishra, most celebrated, distinguished litigation lawyer we have in the country. Dr. Mukul, Shastry, who heads the Department of Legal for Cube Highways. Praveen, Sharma, who is part of the legal team, heads it in PwC. And Shilpa Sachdeva is unfortunately not here. She had some health issues. I'm aware about it. And I'm Sudhir Mishra, who practices environmental laws. So what happened actually? ESG is environment, social, and governance indicators. So before I bring this illustrious panel to you, let me just set you a narrative. Al Gore, who was the most famous and perhaps the most unfortunate US vice president, who didn't become a president. The whole world wanted him to become the president. He didn't become a president. He last week said that this is the worst climate negotiation he has ever heard. And because OPEC is hosting this entire climate initiative in Middle East, any issue, any culmination on fossil fuels will not happen. Anything substantial will not happen. This was last week. But when the entire proceeding ended in COP, they did mention, okay, we will consider about fossil fuel. I'm talking about the planet and E first. Nothing substantial was passed because India was not committal, China was not committal. Now parallelly, also please consider, even if we are talking about net zero in 2070, India has alternative power now, non-fossil fuel power, roughly 35 to 40% in the grid. While we are still doing that, in last 10 days, India has ramped up its entire coal-powered generation, despite all the talks of air pollution because of poor emissions in the power plants. 11 power plants around Delhi, by the way, even if you have closed down Badapur and others. So how you will deal with all of these things? How will a growing economy, a 5 trillion economy, will deal with these grave challenges? Every business, like another US person, I'll have to quote the climate negotiator, who is the climate, what is his name? Anybody can mention the climate negotiator of US government, who was earlier the Secretary of State? John Kerry, wonderful, wonderful. John Kerry said that every lawyer, in a lawyers' conference in ABA, he said every lawyer has to become an environmental lawyer. And that's why this panel is sitting here. So before I'll come to Mukul and he will set the tone, I will just give few more data points to you. The whole country is talking about, so E we have addressed, whole country is talking about the monsoon leaves, and they're also talking about what Narayan Murthy talked about, 70 hours. So that's the elephant in the room for S. When we come to G, we have issues after issues, whether it's upscaling of reservations, your entire structure of reporting, corporate compliances, advocacy, whether you will allow the ranking of India in the global business indexes, how much actually it has improved, all that is part of G. So what companies will do? How even after SEBI has said that 1,000 companies have to essentially now report on the environmental, social and governance parameters, and how battle-ready companies are. How much they are ready to imbibe ESG as a business initiative, as a business amplifier, and what companies are doing, Mukul will address first.
Thanks, Mr. Mishra. Thanks, BW Legal World, for having me. And Mr. Mishra, as always, has set the context wonderfully well, that ESG right now is the buzzword. I'm a bit under the weather, so please excuse my voice. So no doubt ESG right now is the buzzword for all the corporates, and especially after the SEBI BRSR core, which now they have introduced in 2023. Though it's not a new thing, in 2018 itself. So BRSR core of SEBI refers to the guidelines, national guidelines on responsible business conduct, which was in 2018. The government has passed. So it's not a new thing. It is still there for the last 7-8 years. It was there in the mind of regulators and government. So in that BRSR core, the SEBI has mandated a lot of things that you have to report and you have to rectify. And there are 9 key principles which BRSR core talks about. And it's a wonderful, so it talks about environment, it talks about social, human capital, it talks about consumer, it talks about vulnerable and marginalized stakeholders. So it's a wonderful big document that a company has to fill in and has to report. And when you're reporting those things, obviously, you are going to act upon on those things. But now, obviously, ESG is a key thing. But then again, we have to understand one simple thing, that ultimately it is business which has to be the driving core, isn't it? Because business has to be the engine. Everything else obviously has to support business, but the business engine should not fail, and should not be too much into compliances. Only good for people like me who are heading legal and compliance, but it's not good for business to just be run by compliances and by filling forms, and focus completely shifts to just compliances. I was just in the previous panel about DPDP, so we have this. So now you see for a CEO, he has to comply with so many things. Obviously, there are sector regulations and the business challenges, but along with that, he has to be very mindful of the data that he's getting. He has to be mindful of the environmental regulation. He has to be mindful of the social problems. He has to be mindful of governance per se. So you see how much we have burdened our business people with so many things. So it's a balancing act. And before I just conclude, just one small thing I'd like to add. But then again, we have to do it, and especially I come from a PE fund, so ours is a PE platform. And therefore, interestingly, the UN has started with the concept of PRI, which is basically Principles of Responsible Investment. And therefore, every investor which is investing in these companies have to see that the investment is done in the right manner. And therefore, there are 2 reports that are generated. One is the transparency report and one is the assessment report. Transparency is all about governance. Assessment is all about how environmental and social friendly your business initiatives are. So therefore, the investors also are investing into those businesses which are ESG friendly. So I'll just rest my opening comments here.
Good opening comments, and I welcome Dr. Batra, and just see that he's attending this panel, how much important it is for him, the ESG part. All his conferences which we attend, and I want to say in front of him, I'm completely stunned with the kind of emphasis the new companies are giving to environment, especially environment and social. For example, I was just last week moderating a panel, and there was this new ice cream company which has already got 40 outlets in the country. Now that ice cream company was working on the model of the ice cream, but they were also working on the model of a straw which will be used with the ice cream shake. So the shakes which they wanted to make was not that important. They were more careful that we don't want to use even paper straw. So for the first time, they started using rice husk straw. And that's your problem of parali burning. So if you can make a straw out of it, just imagine how much impact it will have. So that company is actually putting up stories that how they did this entire transition. While they were inventing new concepts of these shakes, they were also thinking how they will be environmentally responsible. Mukul, you made a very important part. Ultimately, it's business. And I will come to, basically Bharati will guide us. That look, there are big businesses which are already taking giant steps towards sustainability. If you talk about sustainability, what sugar industry has done in India, especially in last 10 years on ethanol blending, and how much it has helped on environmental causes. Bharati, you'd like to elaborate on that.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thanks to Sudhir. Well, at its core, what is ESG? ESG at its core is the companies trying to identify and mitigate risk, and also find the opportunities for the right growth for the businesses. That's what ultimately ESG is all about. Well, I think ESG has right now become a very cool word, because prior to COVID, not everybody, attention was there on ESG. It's only sometime in 2020 was a very pivotal role, it played a very pivotal role. In 2020, there was a remarkable growth in the companies investing in ESG products. In fact, there was a survey in Investopedia and Tree Huggers readers where it was noticed that 53% of the consumers using ESG products, it sort of created interest in them, and it converted to 19% of the companies incorporating the ESG in their own business models. Well, coming to the sugar industry, we do have called ethanol. Now, I don't know if everybody is aware that ethanol is primarily out of molasses, which is a byproduct of sugar. Sorry, did somebody say something?
No, nothing.
Okay. So ethanol gets blended with petrol. And as of now, on an average, 20% of the petrol, ethanol gets blended into the petrol across the India. So there is a ethanol blending program, which is a policy given by the government of India in 2012. And ultimately, ESG, I believe, is it also major stakeholder is the government, because government needs to support it with a robust regulatory framework. Because end of the day, if you leave it to the companies will not want to forgo the short-term capital profitability for long-term strategies of so-called ESG. So therefore, there needs to be a right amount of push from the government in terms of the regulatory framework. And also, the companies need to look at the larger goals, end of the day. So ethanol policy has been hugely supported by the government of India. It's, in fact, why should we be looking at ethanol? Ethanol it controls pollution, and it's in the transport, it reduces emissions. Now, these are the steps taken by the sugar industry. There's something called, in fact, Toyota, Maruti has tied up with ISMA, wherein you will see hybrid vehicles coming, where you have flex fuel engines, which is now they're running on 20% of ethanol blend petrol, but you'll see very soon all the vehicles should be running on 100% of ethanol. Obviously, there is a argument in the market vis-a-vis electric vehicle versus the ethanol, what is the gain, profit, etc., etc. But end of the day, we should not forget that the electric vehicles again are based on the fossil fuels. And if we are looking at renewable energy sources, as the sugar industry is expanding its portfolios, diversifying, whether it's plastic waste management, whether it is on a green power, that's renewable energy sources based, bagasse-based cogeneration, or ethanol, the sugar industry is definitely ramping in terms of at least the E part in ESG. And E and S, I believe, is quite interlinked, definitely. So I think...
Yeah. Very, very, very good initial thoughts. And Meghna, I'll come to you as the last resort, like disputes and litigations are the last resort. Praveen, I'll come first. And Praveen, before you address this gathering, now PwC has done amazing work on few of the stories of ESG compliances and ESG as a business strategy. Even those reports I was looking at. But I just want to address to the data. The new startups, India after US, China, we have the most robust startup ecosystem in the world. 70,000 startups we have in India. But the shocking part is only 7 to 10% are prepared for any ESG commitment. Now, they all will become giant operations after some time. So when you have these stories of ice cream, which I was telling you, I have another story to tell you. Again, thanks to Dr. Batra, because I was part of that panel. There was this apparel company which was saying that people after people, and Mukul, you made this point, consumer behavior also decides how much committed we will be to ESG. So consumer actually returned this because there was over packaging on that apparel. He said, I will not take it. Why you have layered it with 5 layers of packaging? Now imagine 5 years back, this was not possible. So Praveen, when you mention about how you look at ESG, what is happening in India ecosystem on ESG, how prepared we are to be on the global stage on ESG parameters?
Oh, well, thank you, Sudhir, for this wonderful question, and thank you everyone for having me here. So very interesting question, and I would just address it in bits and pieces with respect to what all we have said and have set the context for. Now, when it comes to sharing the ESG story for any organization, as you mentioned, that PwC has actually helped a lot of organizations to set that story right in its context. Now it starts with the three key pillars. There are three pillars, what we call it strategy-led reporting and reporting-led transformation, or reporting-led strategy and then again leading it to transformation. Now when I'm talking about these three pillars, certainly ESG does not have to transcend only from a compliance perspective. ESG cannot be looked at in an auxiliary form. Absolutely. And it has to be embedded into the business strategy, because all these business decisions has to be derived with the backing of profitability. Now, certainly ESG asks for a certain amount of investment, efforts, the compliance has its own cost, but eventually you have to make business working. Now, these stories that we have worked with are more from a transformation perspective. Now, how ready India is at a global front, certainly it all started with A, strong stakeholder activism, B, the investors push, C, the regulations. Now, regulations are really catching up quite fast. Now, with BRSR, we have actually set the benchmark.
Just say the full form also, business
responsibility and sustainability reporting.
By SEBI.
By SEBI, it has set the benchmark, and now BRSR Core is setting another benchmark which asks organizations to take reasonable assurance, not limited, reasonable assurance from FY24 from the top 1,000 companies.
Lovely.
So it's starting from there. Now just coming to the point of startups.
बहुत काम बढ़ेगा मेघना. Yes. Sorry, I'm just trying to.
There is another aspect that is being covered, is that all these startups also have to report in another format called BRSR Core to cover 75% of their partners, value chain partners, upstream, including upstream and downstream. So that is getting
it will percolate down.
Yeah. And these startups, certainly, whoever we have worked with, it makes a lot of sense for them to capitalize on the idea of consumer activism, as we spoke about, where we can certainly be more innovative in our ideas and our product launches and setting the right context with respect to the social and governance aspects that come work with us or buy our products. We are a company who is not only financially profitable, but also non-financially working phenomenal.
Brilliant. Very well said. Meghna, now everything is ready for you to go. So basically, I'll just take you in the background. What all of us are saying here, because you have handled such matters and the firm is so well known for handling those disputes. So when in the 90s and 2000 and post 2000, this transformation in this country was happening, because you make a building on a foundation. This is a country where your forest cover was 9% at the time of independence. Today it is 17%. So this is the good work. And your courts have facilitated that. Similarly, the High Courts, Supreme Courts and the NGTs and the empowered committees, what they have done, they have inculcated a culture of strong compliances, which you call a jurisprudence for environmental issues, so far as E is concerned. When you come to S, all the Vishakhas and the POSH Acts and all the judgments which have created rights for the child, for the woman, they all are something which the country is proud of, which shows us internationally in a different way. So that becomes your S. On the G, in last 8-10 years and even before that, the kind of the performance indexes which the world believes in, even if you say we are golden, sone ki chidiya, nobody believed that. But the performance indexes which are there, our ease of doing business, our corruption index, our regulatory compliances, we are now broadly under 100, which we are beyond. So how much courts have played the role in it, and how much this voluntary compliance which is happening now, like plastics, for example, the entire transition of plastic, like we were plastic society and we are lesser plastic society today, is without court intervention. But law firms are playing a big role of telling them on the pollution control board issues, working with the clients seamlessly. How do you see this change happening?
So, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So, while law firms will play their part, and before I come to that part of the question, I think what is essential to address is also a change of mindset that we see. So it's not like courts are working in isolation. So, there was a saying, jaan hai to jahan hai, but jahan hi nahi hai to kuch bhi nahi hai. So I think everybody understands that, and consumers are also very, very aware today of what they are purchasing. They will look
at, is this a sustainable company? Is this something that is using recycled materials? Like on this panel itself, like we've had the discussion about the straws and about the sugar industry. So I think all of that is happening. Courts will always step in and, for example, the top 1,000 companies compliances, if they don't take place, of course that becomes something that could be a compliance and regulatory issue. But there are also statutory compliances under the Environment Protection Act, the Air Act. Let's take Delhi for example. When the buses, the CNG buses came, it was through the Justice Kirpal's judgment which came. So I think courts have always been very, very proactive to step in where there has been a vacuum. And I think as time goes by, we will come to a situation where there will be more mandatory compliances which will have to do with the ESG. But at the moment, there is just regulation, guidelines, and we can all urge, and we will require a different mindset and approach. Yeah. So the more we discuss this, the more we'll get there, because you can't have a situation where the courts will function in vacuum, really.
Right.
So
very well said. So all the four panelists have broadly talked about it. They have talked about consumer behavior and what the market dictates, because we are talking about business and ESG here. So if you see it very closely, what happened in Delhi? How did you get so many electric two-wheelers in Delhi? Even if Bharati is right, it's not addressing the part of the circular economy, but there is a massive shift. When odd even happened in Delhi, scooters and motorcycles were kept out of it. But now, in last 4 years, you know how many scooters and motorcycles have been bought which have no fossil fuel attached to it? It's roughly, the buying has completely changed in Delhi because it's cost effective. It's not only for the love of the environment, it's very cost effective to run a scooter which is e-scooter. So it is consumer behavior. But I would say a bigger success which is happening is on the electric mobility. Both Meghna and Bharati have talked about it. And that's a huge, huge leap for a country which is still looking to continue developing, continue creating its narrative. So Mukul, where do you see road companies being an example on ESG?
Yeah, so road companies and the infrastructure definitely is the sector where we are doing a lot of work for environment. Because see, roads are, to construct roads, it's always an environmental unfriendly kind of a space. It has always been, because huge constructions. And then plying of vehicles and plying of fossil fuel vehicles has always been treated as if they are causing a lot of damage to the environment. And then obviously labor intensive industries, so a lot of social factors are also there. But then past few years, the entire approach has changed. And as I said, that even the investors are looking into those things before investing, that not only it should be a cash generative or a commercial success thing, but it should also be right from ESG perspective. So even that thing has come into mind of investors, and that is where the UN principles of responsible investing has come into picture. And all the multiple or the multinational investors are very much aligned to that idea. Having said that, and obviously there are the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 patterns or ESG reporting. Scope 1 is something which is directly, which is in my hand, like where we have electric vehicles for road patrolling. Scope 2 is basically where you have indirect, so whatever you're purchasing, you are purchasing from renewable sources. And scope 3 is primarily asking your supplier of goods and services to be environment friendly. But then in all these things, I feel the S part still is missing. If you see, the focus is mostly on E and G, because E, there are 100 crores of fines, and you see all judgments of courts, they're always focusing on E. Likewise G, SEBI, LODR is there, all the reporting, governance. But that's S part. Though we talk about human capital, we talk about them, but then I still feel diversity, inclusion, and those pieces are completely missing even from the bigger radar. We talk about them a lot in conferences, but on the ground I have not yet seen it taking off at that level.
So well said. Bharati, your final thoughts in a minute. I have to applaud you for one thing. You have nurtured, if I put that, ISMA, a regulator of a very important industry in the country, and you have put more than a decade there. What do you want other such association to learn from ISMA so far as the ESG is concerned, or maybe just S or just G, whatever you want to say?
I think ultimately for any industry, I would say it's a policy, again a policy driven, right? End of the day, there has to be some conducive policy, some support from the government, and obviously for the companies, there has to be some short-term, long-term capital profits to see that. And And besides this, of course, let's not forget that today we've woken up to the words of SDGs, environment, and all these, goals. Even whether it's investors, whether it is consumers, everybody's become very conscious. And this has become very paramount importance for everybody before investing or before even consumers plan to engage with such industries or even buy such things. Everybody's become very, very subconscious, very conscious of this. So therefore, there is a transformation shift which is happening, which is, though it's gradual, it is happening, but there are still concerns in terms of policies or companies, looking at larger picture than just short-term goals. Because as a GC internally, I do have these concerns internally. It's always about balancing and trying to, mitigate the risk and highlighting the risk along with the budgets, the so-called budget balancing.
Okay.
So that is where these concerns come.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Praveen, if PwC will do one pro bono ESG report, will you consider green arbitration, how it can help the cause of environment as a ESG report? It will be a great effort to actually, because a lot of pages are wasted and I am told that 20,000 trees are cut to do one arbitration.
No, absolutely, Sudhir. This is something that, not only PwC, as a big four.
आप बड़े हो ना, आपसे मांग रहे हैं.
But
माँ से नहीं मांग सकते.
No, but certainly, big fours and the entire corporate ecosystem certainly push the idea of green arbitration. And certainly, and environment anyway is a focus of the matter, Sudhir. Everywhere we've talked about COP28, where we have set the targets. In fact, global target has been revised to 250, net zero by 250. India has set the target.
So let's do something more concrete. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Silfco, I will put a word, Meghna will put a word, PwC will collaborate with us on no cost basis. We'll do a joint report on ESG. Let's take out something from here. BW will be happy about it.
No, absolutely.
Can we try that together? Don't commit.
Right.
Has like midway during the COP28, I saw Secretary of
We
Government
discussed
of India.
that initially, but we
कि हम एकदम coal phase out नहीं कर सकते, right?
रातों रात बनाना शुरू कर दिया हमने last 1 week में. यही बोला हमने panel.
So I really want Praveen, give us a realistic sense of how was COP28 vis-a-vis the business world in India.
So the realistic answer is, being a consultant, it's good for consulting business. That is one. But no, I believe that there is a long road.
Lobbyists at COP28.
There is a long road to go. There is a long road to go. Certainly, at a global geopolitical sense, it's just at a very nascent stage. But certainly, India as a country has huge aspirations, not only to become a leader economically, being a 5 trillion economy or a developed nation by 47, but to do so, we also have to do good in all ESG parameters as well. Being a voice of global south, set our own targets, but certainly has to protect our interest as well, that we are dependent on fossil fuels. So no, certainly, there is a long road to go with respect to what is happening across the world. But the good development is that every region is catching up with the regulations. The CSRD regulations are, have come up later than the BRSR regulations. Similarly, SEC is looking at,
I'm asking, how did we do as a country?
Poorly.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, that's more of a, yeah.
Okay.
We could have done better.
Meghna, the last word to you. What do you think?
I think when push comes to shove, and we saw that in COVID, courts went virtual. We started giving up on the voluminous briefs. We have all moved to iPads and laptops, and I really struggled, but one has done it. So I think once the push comes is also when you will see a lot of action, but it can't be in a vacuum. It has to be a change of mindset, and I think you can't just put everything on the government. The investors also want it. They want long-term solutions. So you have to focus a little bit more on highlighting that maybe right now you have to invest a little bit more, but in the long term, how does that profit you? And so I think with more discussions, more
Famous
writing.
economist said, in the long term, we are all dead.
Yes, and
The
in
way
fact,
we are doing
yes.
it may come
So in
true,
fact,
you know.
I said that right in the beginning, Anurag, that जहान ही नहीं बचने वाला तो जान है तो जहान है तो होने ही नहीं वाला. So I don't think we have a choice to now push this anymore. So even now, even if we do this at alarmist pace and we have more people like Sudhir trying to propel this in the right direction, we all must come together to do it. And I think the next generation is a lot more aware. So I as
They
an
are.
optimist, I feel there is hope. And
Okay.
I see that with the next generation.
Okay,
definitely.
thank you. We're
Thank you.
absolutely out of time. I finished my panels on time. Thank you. Thanks a lot.